Radio found me. I didn't find it. My quest was to be in the business, to be independent. Anything I do is always about redundancy and the ability to be self-sufficient. True leadership are people who go their own direction only to arrive there and discover that they were followed. You've got to be sincere about, first, where you're going. Secondly, how much you care for others in doing so. And people will listen.
Welcome to Bottled Up. I'm your host, Andrew Allen, and today we're launching into the fascinating world of space right in our own backyard as we talk with Michelle Anderson, CEO and Executive Director of the Infinity Science Center in Pearlington, Mississippi. Located next to NASA's Stennis Space Center, this remarkable facility serves as both a gateway to space exploration and a premier STEM education center for our region. Join us as we discover how this 70,000 square foot science center came to be and learn about its vital role in sharing Mississippi's impressive but often overlooked contributions to the space industry. So pop open a Pepsi and stay tuned for a fun and educational conversation you don't want to miss. Today we're joined by Rip Daniels, CEO of WJZD Incorporated, a true pioneer in Mississippi radio broadcasting. In this episode, you'll hear the fascinating story of how Rip built a radio empire from the ground up, starting with just a closet-sized studio and a satellite connection. You'll also learn about his family's deep local and entrepreneurial roots dating back to 1876 in Turkey Creek, and how those generational lessons shaped his approach to business and life. Join us for an inspiring conversation about community, family legacy, and the power of dedication to your craft. So pop open a Pepsi, folks, and stay tuned for a fun and inspirational conversation you don't want to miss. Mr. Rip Daniels, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Drew.
Rip, I wanted to kind of start off by a little bit of your history and the origins of how you got into the radio business. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about where you grew up. I know you're a local boy on the coast, so tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and then we'll kind of start talking about how WJZD came to be.
Let me give you a so that you'll understand. My family's been here in Gulfport since 1876. Started right there in Turkey Creek. There were 4 families that had land grants, and my great-great-grandmother, whose house is still there, by the way, on Rippey Road, had 120 acres. And out of those 120 acres, she sold some to what became the creosote plant.
Okay.
Had it not been for the creosote plant, the Gulf Coast, and I dare say much of the South, wouldn't be the South. The creosote was used, that black tar substance that was on poles to stop the termites.
Right.
It became extraordinarily important. So that kind of was the start of my family. Her husband, my great-great-great-grandfather, was part of the U.S. Colored Troops, and that's how he found out about the land grants after the Civil War. And so each of them, he died, and she donated land to the first school there in Turkey Creek and to Mount Pleasant's church. By the way, both were still there, not the one that she had built, but because it's across the street. But it kind of set up for an environment of entrepreneurship. The first industrial seaway was, in fact, Rippey Road, because you had the creosote plant, and then you had something called the yaryang that extracted turpentine from trees, pine trees, and it exploded in 1943. But all along that area were my people. The first hotel, African-American owned hotel, was owned by a cousin of mine. Another great uncle had water derricks. It became the laundromat for the Great Southern Club.
Oh, wow.
Which was downtown Gulfport. A lot of artisans, builders, and the like were all there. And I think that was the basis for why the first thing I became was a builder. Of course, my dad was a cement finisher, which meant I had to be a cement finisher. Mm-hmm. The way he put it was that, he had to teach me what he knew, just in case what I thought I knew wasn't enough for me to make a living. So I became a cement finisher, but as that was on his side. And then on my mother's side, I learned about all this other entrepreneurship. And I think that generated a drive for me to go into business. I've always wanted to go into business. My mother encouraged me to do that. And And all through school I did. Matter of fact, I went to school with your father, Drew, there at Gulfport East.
Yes, sir.
East Vikings. And of course, he was a year ahead of me. I think he was actually with my sister. But you'll find that in those days, Drew, in the late 1960s, early 1970s, we were taught to be independent first. And we were taught the value of land and the value of family and how the two should never be separated. The first business I went into, bricks and mortar, was actually my great-great-grandmother's house that was moved from what is now Bow View to Tea Garden Road. And it became Rip's Kumbaya. Turned out to be a little lounge restaurant. I was one of the youngest African-Americans to get a liquor license in 1978. This is after I came back from college and so forth.
Where did you go to college, Rip?
I went to college, Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, also USM, also Gulf Coast Community. I left college because I had my first son. I was Tabari. And, well, that wasn't the only reason. That was the main reason. But another reason that fueled it was that I realized in college I was learning generalities.
Mm-hmm.
While some guy would go to work for the company as a mailman or a maintenance guy, like let's just say, Mr. Slogel, George Slogel, he started in the mailroom. And so when you do that in a company, you learn specific experiences in that company. Whether you went to college or not, the point is you learn the business of the company and the trust of the company, and they move you up. So I saw that when I was at Eckerd College. And, needless to say, by the time the draft rolled around in 1972, I was 37 on the draft and had to make some decisions.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
Thank God the draft ended in 1973. So, I'm kind of capitalizing all of this. I never did just one thing, Drew. In other words, while being a cement finisher, I was also an announcer. Started on that in 1973.
Tell me a little bit about that. What would that entail as far as an announcer?
Well, at the time, like I told you, I was always doing something entrepreneur because I had to teach myself business. So I was a manager at a store called the Ranch in Edgewater Mall and men and women's store. And Carl Haynes, who was the manager of WTAM, would come by and he was seeking to get advertisement. And we would advertise, and I ended up doing the commercials for them. And bada boop, bada bing, he liked my voice, invited me to do some other things. And as fate would have it, I ended up not working at the haberdashery and instead going to work with him in sales and on the air.
So, Rip, was that your first kind of soiree into recording in the radio business?
Actually, I did it in college. I just sit in a time or two there at WFPC, which became Eckerd College. So that gave me a little taste of it, but I never once aspired to be in radio at all.
So you didn't get in it and like something click and be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It's just you kind of had. Did you find you had a natural ability with it?
It came easy. I have a gab, and my father told me, I normally say kids should be seen, not heard. He told me it's better for me.
I've heard that a bunch.
It's better for me to be heard, not seen. So this was the way to do that, So radio found me. I didn't find it. My quest, Drew, was to be in the business, to be independent. My dad told me, God bless him, he did not graduate from high school, but a wise old man. He explained to me that you first have to decide how you want to live before you decide what you're going to do. In other words, what you're going to do when you grow up. Well, the question is how you want to be when you grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And then that dictates what you're going to do when you grow up. And then I told him that I wanted to go into business. He said, well, son, what you've got to decide is whether you want to save money or you want to save time. If you save money, you got to do it yourself. If you save time, then you'll pay someone to do it. Your task is to figure out what is the most efficient way with your money and your time. And so
some wise words.
Yeah. With that in mind, I started in the business very, very early. Since I was in radio, I started Happenings Unlimited. I was doing promotions and bands and so forth along the coast from Bay St. Louis, 100 Men's Hall to what was called the Kickoff Club in Moss Point. And, in my 20s, I was making pretty good money while still doing construction. I had an opportunity to do a national a commercial for Miller Beer that made me rich at the time. At least I thought it was. But, I hit a pretty good lick there.
What year was that, Rip?
I was in the late 70s.
Okay.
Did also a commercial for Danny's clothing store. So, with a voice like this, I found out it was pretty desirable. So I began to utilize it a little bit, and others began to utilize it as well. And I was able to go a few places that others didn't go with commercials.
Well, so it's the mid to late 70s. You've hit a couple of licks. You've done a national ad with Miller. You've kind of started into the announcing and radio business. What made you decide? I know that through what you've told me, generationally, your entire genetic code is surrounded by entrepreneurship. I mean, going all the way back into the 1800s, so when did you decide, all right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my own company and create WJZD? How did that happen?
Well, that's an interesting story. While being in radio, I also opened a lounge there on Tea Garden Road. And you got to keep in mind, I was very young, 24 years old when I opened it. And I had a baby and a wife in tow. And unfortunately, in 1984, I lost it in a fire. Literally lost everything I had.
Jeez.
So I had to literally start all over again. And like I said, I've always done several things. While I was a bartender, I got my broker's license because I was renting that from my great-grandmother, and I knew that ultimately, like I said, I wanted to be in business.
So when you said you got your broker's license, that's real estate?
Yes, in real estate. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I had my broker's license, and I lost it in 1984, and so I set out, started working for then WQFX radio while also having Daniels Real Estate Inc. So I would like redundancy. In business, you have to diversify.
Right.
You can't just rely on one thing, but you do the same kind of business. I mean, profit and loss for one business is a profit and loss for another business. It's just a matter of math, really. So I went with WQFX and still was building. And as fate would have it, a construction permit came up for 94.5. And a good friend of mine, Lynn Cole, who's now deceased, worked with me when I was at QID. Drew, I capsulizing a whole lot of this. Because I was working at stations and other places, 3-4 different stations.
So you were doing part-time work at multiple stations.
No, you got to keep in mind my aim. I wasn't trying to find anything in radio. I was seeking to learn how to be in business for myself.
Got it.
Be it radio, be it a snowball stand. So my quest is always to be self-sufficient and independent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I could go into any business at any given time. I've sold crap load of natural gas to Senegal. So, for me, it wasn't, I wish I could sit here and tell you my quest was to one day own a radio station. Oh,
right. It just kind of worked itself out that way, huh?
Well, right. That's exactly right. That's exactly how I got a hotel. I had no intentions. It was not a matter of getting it. It was a matter of wanting to be independent. So when Lynn Cole came to me and said, oh, yeah, they got a construction permit available for Class A radio station in Gulfport. And we're putting together a group. So Lynn and 2 lawyers and myself, I became the general partner. We set out to get what was then Beach Broadcasting to get this construction permit. Well, that was in 1985, actually 85, 86. And I must tell you, simultaneously, I was building duplexes, which I still own. So like I told you, my life is like, I work from can to can now, Drew.
Rip, when were you sleeping when you were doing all this?
Even to this day, sleep is overrated for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get 5 hours. I sleep when I want to. And if I get sleepy now, then I just go to sleep. It's not like I don't let the schedule of man dictate what I do.
I understand.
So I ended up with these 3 partners, and we were fighting to get the radio station. It took 7 years. And I found out within those 7 years that I really didn't have any partners. What I had were individuals who were trying to profit off of just getting a construction permit because they wanted to sell it and not build it. So I had to buy out, or force out everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it. Took a little bit, but, I'm resourceful. And so I ended up with the construction permit for this radio station. And, the rest is kind of history, except I'd never been a station manager. I've worked in radio, but I've never been afraid to learn and put my money where my mouth was when it came to learning. Most people don't understand that you have to invest in your learning. And I don't mean just in college. I had a whole lot of apprenticeships. My father also told me, because he did not have a high school education, he said, son, it's not the one who has the diploma, it's the one who has the license. Even a doctor or a lawyer has to be licensed, because that means then you can make money. If not, then you are going to work for someone else. But his point is that the more licenses I had, like I'm a licensed broadcaster, I'm a licensed contractor, licensed real estate broker, and a few other licenses down the road. That I have. It allows me now to work in the public trust and be able to sell my services or sell my goods. So I ended up putting this station on in a building that I had went to kindergarten in. The first station was at the corner of Common Road and Tea Garden. That was Miss Wells' kindergarten. And I had asked, I bought that building from a relative of hers because it was falling in after a hurricane, and started it. It ended up being a nursery for a while. I rented that at a premium there on a really important corner. Then it became a gift shop and my real estate office. But Drew, what you still, again, have to understand is that a lot of this is overlapping. While I had the duplexes, while I had the application for the radio station, I had, a serious real estate business.
Right.
And it was located on that corner. Well, I never forget it. I got a phone call while I was doing the roof in Wood Glen in front of Gulfport East. Not Wood Glen. Yeah, Wood Glen in front of Gulfport East. I was on the roof with my guys, and I got a phone call that I had won the construction permit. And now I have the task of, I got to come up with money to get a transmitter, and how am I going to put it on the air, and blah, 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 blah. The list goes on and on. I mean, I wasn't impoverished. I was doing pretty well. But the radio stations cost a lot. You're talking about $40,000 for just a transmitter.
Right.
And then a tower and so forth. So I always don't limit myself. I always figure, okay, what do I start with? Problem with people in businesses typically is that they don't know how to start. And
I would agree with that. I think that the hardest part is that first step forward. And, what was your first step?
My first step was obviously having a roof over my head. I had to have a location. This station was located in a closet, and it was a one-man 24-hour radio station, me. And I had to seek out programming that could allow for that. And it was satellite radio networks. And it offered 24-hour programming with Tom Joyner and Mel Devon, and just 24 hours of R&B. So I started it in March 20th, 1994.
Okay.
My son Michael flipped the switch. We were on the air, and we've been fighting a good fight ever since. But again, I thought to myself, if there's a 24-hour satellite service, why don't I open that? And then I can have my own affiliates, which I did. I started the American Blues Network, ABN, and I started to uplink my signal to Galaxy 4 satellite, but that's owned by NPR, and covered a footprint from Mexico City to Quebec. So I ended up with affiliates all across the United States. That
was a good move, Rip.
That's a great move. It allowed me now to have my own network and to be autonomous and 24 hours with very few people, So I still have it, by the way. I don't uplink the satellite anymore. This $250,000 dish in front of me is designed to do that, but now it's more economical to go on the internet. You've got straight lines now. a lot more economical. It was costing me a pretty penny to go 24 hours. But we did well. We partnered with American Urban Radio Network. They did the sales, and I traveled a bit and got affiliates up to about 100, 150 affiliates or so. Anything I do, Drew, is always about redundancy and the ability to be self-sufficient.
So 1994, March 20th, 1994, you kicked off. I remember we had a discussion last year about y'all's 30th anniversary, which is a big deal. And I also know that how many kids do you have, Rip?
I have three children, two boys and a girl, and a stepson.
And they're involved with you in the business, correct?
Yeah, my oldest is involved, but he's now taking a little hiatus. He's got some interest in acting, and so he's gonna spread his wings a little bit. Still does some support here and there. He was the vice president of the company. My son Michael is the youngest. He is now the manager of the hotel.
Got it.
In Bistro downtown. He's also the secretary here for the corporation.
Okay.
I didn't real my daughter, unfortunately. Found out I had a vasectomy and found out I had a daughter.
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah, 17 years old, and it was a strange thing how it all came about, and it was a great surprise, but a great blessing.
Absolutely.
I took her in and sent her off to college, and she met Mr. Wrong, and needless to say, she's now not really a part of the company, but part of the family.
I understand that. So working with your kids and watching your kids kind of work in the business, how has that affected you personally? I mean, I know that you and I kind of know a little bit of the history with my dad and, my granddad, and he kind of came in the 60s and 70s and was working at the Pepsi plant over off of Hughes Avenue. And then that kind of in tandem with what happened to you, that burned down. And then they moved over to the facility that we're at now in the 80s. And I came in I think I came on in 1998 when I was about 12 years old. So as a parent, how does it make you feel having your kids work with you or show interest in something that you've built?
There is no greater reward, and there was no greater desire than my children. Everything I've done, Drew, has been for my children. If I didn't have children, I would probably be in Europe.
Yeah.
Or Africa. My greatest motivation to be self-sufficient is that. And I tried to impart that on Tabara and Michael and Nicole. However, I think they get that. But sometimes your offspring are not as hungry as you are, right?
I understand that.
And they have to be placed in an environment where they realize that it's not a matter of hunger, but desperation, that I drive the way I do, because I'm a high achiever. I compete with my shadow, and that has helped me to compete with everyone else. Not everybody has that makeup. Now, it is with great delight that I have my children involved. I wish they would be more involved.
Right.
I don't doubt that, unfortunately, you're in a situation where your father's deceased. I don't doubt that matures you in such a way, and certain things you glean from that when it lands in your hands.
It does. It did. Luckily, I had 3 years of running the place under my belt. Rip, honestly, if he would have passed away in 2017, I don't think I would have been as well off as I was in March of 2020. So, and plus the team that I have around me, I worked for all of them as a teenager. As a young man, I worked on trucks with them. A lot of my supervisors were route guys that have worked their way up to supervisor level. And so I was a helper on the truck with them. So there's a lot of, they've seen me grow, and some of the guys who work here, a few of them, they were in the hospital when I was born, so there's the way that they look at it now when I'm, in charge of managing them is they don't want to let me down like a son almost, so if I had to take over a company that didn't have the makeup of the family aspect that we have here, I don't think that I would survive. If we were like a corporate entity, where there's no family love, there's none of that. I don't know how I would have done, man, to be honest with you.
Well, I can tell you, if you're a chip off the old block, you would be exactly like your dad, very thorough and very focused and engaging. And I don't mind telling you that, several commissions of boards and times I've dealt with Drew, he'll tell you in a quick, fast, and hurry, I'm not the brightest bulb, but I'm going to learn, and he's going to engage you. He's going to look at you, and he's going to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When he was having a conversation with you, it was just you and him. Everybody else didn't exist in the room,
That's right.
Sometimes to his detriment.
Yeah. Sometimes.
You know what I mean? But so the level of community involvement that WJZD does, I see every year, kind of what the makeup of all the radio groups are on the coast down here, and y'all are number one when it comes to community involvement and getting out there and doing and just hitting the streets and actually being involved in the community. So how did that come about, and when did you have the moment where you said, you know what, we're going to be a local business, but not only are we going to be a local business, we're going to be involved in our community down here?
Well, that's just old radio, Drew. I mean, I grew up in radio at WTAM right there on Pratt Avenue, and old radio was that. It was a time when people would say it must be true. I heard it on the radio, right?
Right.
And you had to be engaged or you didn't stay on the air very, very long. I did a talk show there, radio, way back when. Even before radio, I was engaged in the community. I was a semi-football star, I guess, for Gulfport East, and did quite a few things here. I fought with the city to build the first pool, which, I lost. But, I won, but they decided they where they wanted to put it was just not desirable at all. But so I live here, and coming back as a young man and having a son, and ultimately two, son and wife, I was always taught that, where you live was the most important, and having that land, in that community meant that you have an obligation to that community. And when I say that, I'm talking about the entire South Mississippi, and I dare say all of Mississippi. I'm a very proud Mississippian. And my reasons for being that way is because my daddy was a World War II veteran, and my mother was a maid that ultimately got a diploma. She and her family off of Turkey Creek made great sacrifices and great investments. So, I've always equated what I do with whether I'm doing right by my own.
Yes, and it shows. And, it's being a local radio group and being as successful as you guys are as far as ratings are concerned. I mean, we were looking at just across the board, the ratings that you guys do, and just being as consistent as you are. It's a true testament to how you've lived your life and the things that you've dedicated yourself to, and just how every single one of your promotions is always involved in, educating the community, helping the community. What can we do? This is a problem that I'm seeing. I want to do something to try to fix that problem, and it's just, it's really refreshing to deal with somebody locally who has that mindset. And that not only are you promoting, your brands, but you're also helping a community involvement issue, so I just commend you on it, man, because y'all do a really good job of it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I could tell you it is because of the support of companies like yours that we're able to do it. And we have found this most often with local companies like yours, more so than the national ones. You guys embrace the community. It's very obvious. And when my daddy always told me that your first name says who you are, your last name says what you are. You are Daniels, and therefore you represent. I don't doubt that you feel the same obligation, as being, being Drew.
Yeah. You are correct about that because
That you don't want to embarrass your family. You know that your children are going to be here and their children, and you want to leave a better life for them with everything you do now.
I think that boils it down. That kind of boils it down to its richest to make sure that you're doing right by the legacy you leave behind.
Absolutely. But keeping in mind the motivation behind this is self-satisfaction. I
Right.
can't think of anything, dude, that I just gotta have. I'll do an investment of a car or something, but strictly in business. I don't even own a car myself. Business owns it. The investment that I make and the thing that blings me or comforts me is seeing progress with young people.
Hmm.
We take that to heart. We really, really do. We've been here 30 years because we have talked to 12 plus audience and younger. We try to provide programming that is going to appeal to all segments. That doesn't mean that all segments will be satisfied at any one time, but it does mean that at some point there's going to be some programming based on the time of day that is going to cater to the largest demographic of listeners we have. So, there's some, I guess, technique to what I do, and then the rest is kind of blessing. When you're genuine, people know it.
I agree. I mean, especially if you've been in enough meetings, you can smell when someone's not. You can always smell when someone's has a motive behind what they're saying, and actions speak louder than words too, Rip. You know that.
I just want you to know how proud I am of you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. My dad always liked you a lot.
Look, you
Yeah.
grabbed the bull by the horn, and I'm just going to tell you, the greatest. And my dad, I always learned a lot from my father. He would always tell me that true leadership are people who go their own direction only to arrive there and discover that they were followed.
I love that.
You got people following you there in your plan and outside of your plan. And it's not because you begged them to follow you. It's not because you petitioned them to follow you or said, y'all follow me. It's because they see where you're going. They trust your leadership. And I've tried to impress that upon my sons that, you've got to be sincere about first where you're going. Secondly, how much you care for others in doing so. And people will listen and
I think the treatment of the treatment of other people is one of the things that we can control on a daily basis. And I think that if you are genuine in how you feel about someone and you're honest with people and you treat your employees well and you go above and beyond when it comes to family activities, if I think that people are willing to stay with you a lot longer. If they know that if an emergency happened, I can come and talk to my boss and he's not going to say, well, you just got to get it done. I'm sorry. We're running a business here, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not how we operate. My job as, the president over and CEO over here is to take care of the employees. Whatever they have, my job is to take care of them. They know they're big boys and girls. They know how to handle their jobs. I'm not here to micromanage. I just make sure that I give them what they need
That's
to
right.
succeed. And then, anything big comes up, we'll all gather together and make up a decision. So, Rip, if people want to listen to WJZD, obviously they can listen to 94.5, but what are other ways that they can get your signal and listen to JZD?
Well, we call ourselves JZ 94.5 app now because a significant number, if not half, of the people who listen to us are listening to us on the app and, of course, terrestrial radio. I do a talk show from 9 to 12, and so
Okay.
that's on all platforms, YouTube, Instagram, all Facebook, all of them. We have archives of all other shows. We also have the American Blues Network, which we still have affiliates here throughout Mississippi, Texas, Alabama, and Florida, whereby we send them our signal and they rebroadcast. They won't say national. They won't say American Blues Network, but you will hear some voices here you'll hear on those shows. So you could pick us up on literally all platforms. I still do commercials. And I do documentaries. Just done one for Gulfside over in Waveland. There's several I've done. I'm the voice for the Blues Trail markers there in parts of Mississippi. I wrote some of the actual descriptions. So yeah, you can just about hear me wherever I make a contribution or wherever I'm getting paid.
Absolutely.
Typically, it's me making a contribution and just offering whatever little expertise I have.
Well, Rip, I really appreciate the time and getting to kind of dive into the history of how you got to where you are today as far as the CEO of WJZD Inc. And, I'm excited that we get to do business together. I'm excited that you're still at it and you're still having success. And I look forward to the next time we meet in person, man.
Absolutely. Maybe we can have a Pepsi together.
Absolutely. That sounds good. I'll bring them.
Very good, man.
And that wraps up our conversation with Rip Daniels, CEO of WJZD Incorporated. What an incredible journey from his family's entrepreneurial roots in the 1800s to building a successful radio empire on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Rip is a fountain of knowledge, and I really like his views on the importance of diversifying in business, investing in your own education through licensing, and hands-on experience, and most importantly, being genuinely involved in your community. I especially loved his father's wisdom about deciding how you want to live before deciding what you want to do, and that true leaders don't ask for followers. They simply go their own direction, and others naturally follow. I especially loved his father's wisdom about deciding how you want to live before deciding what you want to do, and that true leaders don't always ask for followers. They simply go their own direction, and others naturally follow. Thank you, Rip, for sharing your story and insights with us. You can catch him on WJZD 94.5 or through their app across all platforms. And a big thank you to all of you, our listeners, for tuning in. At Bottled Up, we're all about uncorking the stories that shape our coastal home. And remember to always support your local businesses, restaurants, museums, and media. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Bottled Up Podcast. Want us to deliver this show to your email inbox as they drop? Want to tell us about how you like the show? Or do you want to tell us about a Gulf Coast business or restaurant that you'd like for us to spotlight in any upcoming episodes? Email Morgan Wheeler at mwheeler, MWHEELER at abevinc.com. That's ABEVINC.com. Want to know more about Allen Beverages and how we work with our clients, partners, and vendors? Check out allenbeverages.com. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Gwynn and Deep Fried Studios.